For Module 7, I'd like to take you through the history of special education law. We're going to look at this as an entire movement that changed from as early as the 1700s all the way up to where we are today. And so some certain things happened. For a long period of time, it was the individual and group efforts of people working together to advocate for individuals with special needs. And it wasn't, as you can see here, until about 1974 that the federal government really stepped in and made a law that protected individuals or students with special needs. And then since 1974, they've been reissuing different laws and coming up with different amendments to those laws in order to advocate for and provide rights to individuals with special needs. And so as we'll look at this PowerPoint, we'll see that it begins with issues of access, so getting students into the classroom or getting students into schools, and then that changed to issues of quality. So first let's get them in the door, and then once they're in the door, let's make sure that what we're providing for them is the most appropriate and adequate education for that individual. It begins with critical event number 1, those individual and group efforts. This is Rousseau, who was a philosopher who believed in liberty of the individual. He believed that inequality did not have to exist, and he believed that we had a responsibility to one another. Also, it was in this time in the 1700s that people began to explore the idea of everybody attending school. In the 1800s, the movers and shakers, they changed. It was more the politicians, and they were saying everybody has to go to school. Many students with special needs were now entering into asylums and institutions, which led to the exclusion of students with disabilities from the general population. In the early 1900s, politicians were still making laws, but some teachers were getting involved. And so now compulsory attendance laws were really being enforced, but also we recognize that as a result, some of the first special education classes were developed in public schools. In the mid-1900s, parents and professional teachers and health professionals began to advocate for their students or for their children. And this resulted in a creation of a lot of community groups. It began in New York with Elizabeth Farrell and a Council for Exceptional Children in 1922. In Ohio, the Cuyahoga Council for Retarded Children started in 1933. The Children's Benevolent League in Washington began in 1936, and it was a group of parents who were trying to help their children who were in the asylum centers. And we had the Welfare League for Retarded Children in New York, as well as the idea that there were only 11 organizations by 1942, but by 1950 there were already 88. And now probably the most prominent was the National Association for Retarded Citizens, which is actually now ARC, the Rights of Citizens with Developmental Disabilities. Okay, perhaps one of the biggest events in education that took place was Brown versus Board of Education. This was in 1954. And the people who were involved in creating this were church groups, parents, the people at large in the civil rights movement, and a group known as the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In this Brown versus Board of Education at the Supreme Court case, justices said, "In these days it is doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life. If he is denied the opportunity of an education, such an opportunity where the state has undertaken to provide it is a right that must be available to all on equal terms." We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. And this was Chief Justice Earl Warren. Critical event number 3 will be continued in the next module, or in the next video.